O'clock, I'll call the planning commission meeting to order. We have roll call, please.
Grant,
Here.
Hutton,
Here?
Poppy,
Here.
Denkert,
Here.
Bosco Jen, Split.
Here.
Yeah, form.
Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's approved. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the November 20th meeting?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from November 20th.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is approved. Our only action item tonight is a public hearing for a conditional use permit for Han Logistics on Hall Street. That's 640 something? Hall
That's
Street?
our office.
Oh, that's your office.
It's just
There's no
Hall
address on it
Street.
yet?
There's no
Okay.
address, yeah.
So just the parcel number. All right, so I will open the public hearing at 7:01. Would you like to just give us an overview of what your intention is for the property?
We're in the business of trucking and we lease trailers. We own over 200 trailers. We need to have additional space available to park the trailers when they're not leased out or being used. So our goal is to have 0 trailers across the road. But times don't warrant that right now. We've had a lot of trailers come back in off a lease because the trucking industry isn't moving along good. So we currently have way more trailers than we'd like to see over there, but we try to take pride in our property, and we have nothing but improved it since we purchased it. It was a farm field and it was weeds for the last year before we bought it. Thistles. We keep it immaculately mowed and have not rooted or harmed it in any way. You're all welcome to come out and walk it. So that's where we stand. We need additional parking. Or we chose to rebuild after a fire, which we could have left. And we do a lot of business in the city of Ripon, even though we're in the town. So we do exceptional business in the city. So way more than your bigger people probably. So all of our contractors to build twice in the last 16 months were local, in town, in the city of Ripon, except the concrete, because there isn't a concrete guy. So we just feel that we've been more than supportive and we need support.
Okay.
So, one way or another. We need no financial support. We're not asking for anything. We're just asking to be able to gravel enough to put the most regularly used trailers. And hopefully the market turns around. It's not unusual for us to lease 25 trailers at a time. But it's also not unusual for 25 trailers to come back at any given time.
All
So-
those trailers, almost all those that you see sitting there on that lot right now, were all leased out. Those didn't exist on our property. We had some more over on our logistics area by our shop. But all those, just to give you an idea of the economy right now, they just have poured back in again. So we're just thankful that we had purchased that property to
I think I listed
put those trailers on.
I think I listed the amount of trailers that are there currently. That numbers went down by 3 of the unlicensed or for sale. But the majority of the trailers are
All licensed.
all licensed, all DOT'd, all road legal, all ready to go. And we At this point, we don't store anything over there. We have 4 trailers that have shop supplies, extra parts, nothing hazardous, nothing liquid. So we will not, and what's the question, we will not at this current time be able to probably park all the trailers on the gravel. So we are expecting to be able to use the rest of our property
All right.
without harming it, without any erosion. There's more erosion when it's a farm field, plowed every year for the last 150 years. We purchased it 2 years ago. There's not been one complaint. We've had trailers on there for 2 years or better. Not one complaint from a neighbor, a city person, anybody.
Not a compliment.
If I wouldn't have came to try to improve the property, I'd still be parking there and nobody would be doing anything. So that's where we're at and what we've done. We prove, I don't have to say anymore. You look across the street into the town and you'll see what we do and what we're about. So we don't plan on doing anything different across the street. So we'd love to go bigger, but I'm not at this point gonna stick that kind of money in it. And we do not finance. We do not borrow. We do not expect any kind of support from anyone.
We have no debt.
So we
All right.
are just, feel we're an asset to your community. We just want to be able to do what we do.
Okay. Are you here to speak?
No, if there's any technical questions, I'm Jason with Excel Engineering.
Okay.
Answer any questions that might come up from a
You're the
technical
engineer for
standpoint.
the project?
Yep.
Okay. And you, sir?
I'm Wayne Lamont. I have property next to theirs, and I have no complaints with what they're doing there, so I just come to see if I could support them in any way.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bless your heart.
And before we close the public hearing portion, is there any questions from the commission members?
Yeah, I had a question. I think you said you had about 4 trailers that are holding some of your spare parts.
Yes.
For your shop.
Yeah.
Do you have any trailers over on the side of the shop that are also using
No.
for spare parts?
No, we don't keep, there's 2 behind the shop. I take
Okay.
that back. There's a steel
2.
trailer that we keep our steel materials for welding and repairing.
Sure.
And then there's kind of a miscellaneous,
So the 4 is that it was 4, right? Or over.
there's
across
4 over there currently.
So those are parts that, you know, axle parts or bearings or
Correct.
wheels or things
Correct.
like that.
Could be,
You'd be,
yeah, it's
okay. So you'd
extra
be,
trailer parts, extra truck parts.
right.
We've
So you're-
tried not to take anything over there that isn't in a trailer.
Right,
There's one trailer that's, we're trying to part out, but time hasn't allowed it. So it ended up over there.
how do you transfer things back and forth across the public road there? Do you just take the whole trailer over to the shop side?
No,
and
I
move
would
things, or
take
you
my
just-
pickup at, now,
in the bed,
now that they're
sure.
designated trailers, I take my pickup or
Okay.
a forklift or depending on what you need. So, and the only reason there's 4 trailers is I'm an organized guy. Go out in the field and each one of them trailers is as straight as an arrow, or close. There's nothing, they're spaced, so the only reason there's 4 trailers is I choose not to clutter the inside of my trailer.
Right.
It's all organized, it's all, one's got wood, lumber wood that we use for the business. So,
You said you came here because you wanted to make improvements to that. What were the improvements you wanted to make?
up on that end, we want to put in some trees
Okay.
but we want to put gravel. We're not tracking anything in the road now. But the vegetation, dandelions mainly, thistles, are, from being drove on the high, dry side, are being affected. So it just would look better with gravel, be an improvement.
This is a printout from Stewart's. You could pass it around. And it's also got a couple of quotes to do. There's section 1 and 2 with the trees. To give
this-
privacy, total privacy from behind the funeral home and then all the way around.
And I think it even shows that we're not putting in foot-tall trees. We're putting in grown trees.
Yeah, we're not gonna wait for them to grow.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to respect our neighbors, and as this gentleman knows, we've done nothing but improve it. And we plan on improving it and keeping up with it, so.
I don't know if you guys have site plans in your packets or not, but this is what was submitted.
You do have one, but it's hard to
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, the larger sheets are,
So just under 20,000 square feet of improved surface up in the northeast corner. David and Debbie, their town property is
Is
just
over
to the
here, yeah.
north. Yep, you got Hall Street. And we're looking to plant evergreens between this property and the funeral home property, just to provide some sort of a buffer.
And we do plan on extending the trees, but we don't want to be forced to do that at this time.
And what's your reasoning for the total area that you're planning on graveling?
Because that way.
Restricting that size versus using more of where you're
Well, I'd like to
trailer
use
storage?
more, but I don't want to jump through all the bureaucratic hoops with everything.
Yeah, I think what he's hoping to do is, like he said, is the majority of the trailers will be out in lease, but when he's got a few trailers that need to be parked over here, you can park them adjacent to the improved surface up in the northwest corner.
if you went with this existing, or rather, if you went with this planned graveling, about how many trailers would you expect to be able to fit on this?
Well, if you put them in where you can't access them all at any given time, I could put more.
Right.
But that makes me decide which ones to put in the back.
Mhm.
I may have to move all the ones in the front
Right,
to get to the ones in the back. So
just roughly it would be,
30, maybe 40. If you really squeeze, you might get 50 on there, depending on how close and how. But if you start filling it completely, you know, you'd have to move maybe, they're 53 foot long,
right,
so you might have to move 2 full rows to get at one, you know, so we do have less frequently used trailers. And we have some that are for sale, some that I've gotten in deals that I've purchased. So it's not, I bought from Tom Rogers 2 trucks and 12 trailers in the deal. They were all storage trailers, they're really of no use to me, so it's a matter of taking them to get rid of them.
okay.
A month ago, I got 2,000 for one, this month I got 1,000. I don't want to keep flooding the market and going down.
Right.
I want to get,
But you would plan, if you had this gravel area to use, you would plan on having 30 as the
to
capacity? that you-
utilize,
you
I
think you-
try to utilize to be decent
Right,
as much as I can of it rather
Right.
than,
but bar any, exigent, some big flood, or you guys get a whole bunch back in, you would kind of have that number be.
yeah, and I can't, all 200 could come in a month from now.
Right,
You know,
That's
there's
a possibility,
30 at
yeah.
Mills Cove. So Mills Cove closes in Red Granite, I got 30 trailers. Amcor had 30 trailers. They went down to 0. They
Now
just
they're up
went
to
back
8.
to 8 more. They could call and take 20 more next week, so we don't know.
right.
Signature Waivers got a couple,
Yeah.
Action Printing, and Fond du Lac, we're everywhere, all the way up to Green Bay. Oshkosh Post Office even has one. A lot of
So it's an unpredictable market at this time.
Right.
We don't buy trailers to store them, hoard them,
Right,
blah, blah, blah. We buy them to make money
and
and
have them be leased, yeah.
fortunately, they're paid for and they can sit. So we don't have to liquidate. So we're very fortunate in the way we've conducted our business and, yeah.
You said that you don't want to be forced tonight to put these trees in?
We would-
What's your timeline that you would put them in?
Depending on the economy, depending on the, like we said, we don't finance, we don't, if you want to provide them and we'll go for it. But it's no loan on my part.
Yeah.
All right.
It's not that we can't set a time, we just don't, we didn't put them on the original plan because we don't want to be forced to do, and just because you approved this tonight, if we don't have the money in the spring now, who knows? I would say we would, but, yeah.
So, do planting those trees make a difference?
Well, that's what they're gonna
And,
consider.
I mean,
Yeah, I would think it could make some difference to, somebody. Definitely.
It's not against the question, I'm not gonna storm out of here.
Yeah.
No.
see, we
Because
got
you would
this
like-
all set up with Stewart's. The one section would be done this spring, and then the next section, he figured they could get done like fall. But
It's a
we
pretty
didn't know if
big-
that's something you guys would approve, you
Right.
know?
It's a pretty big investment on our part, so,
Yeah.
Yeah, I
For
think
all of it.
Trees are definitely,
yeah, and especially, like I said, we're not trying to plant a little bitty thing
Right.
that if
10
in
foot.
10 years it's this tall. We're planting something that's probably,
10 foot, starting out.
So
Yeah.
I'm understanding this to be a courtesy to your neighbors who
yeah,
have not
this
complained.
this was my idea.
Right, okay,
Our
I'm just,
idea.
yeah.
This wasn't,
And your neighbors haven't complained?
they would rather look
Right.
at those trailers than the junkyard. Go to the nursing home and we get all kinds of comments. We love looking at the trailers, we like them when they move.
They like the reflectors.
You're, maybe to somebody it's an eyesore, but we haven't found one person, so far. Doesn't mean we won't, but,
I think maybe the most sensitive, people that would be affected by this would be the funeral home that's right there, right?
I
And I
agree.
could, they don't get people from just Ripon, they get people from all
From
out of town.
Yeah.
And,
Yes.
not that trailers are inherently an eyesore, but you could imagine that you would be in the place of someone who's grieving, and
Christie,
definitely trees are a much more appealing thing to see than a
there's
lot
no
of
question
trailers,
we will
but-
put the trees there. That'll probably be done even before the parking lot gets done. But it's, with her, it hasn't been an issue. She's the one that leases it, operates it. Christie Sullivan, can't think of her.
Yeah, I can't
Not
think of
sure of the
his name.
correct pronunciation, but. And in fact, when she meets with her people, the window's right out the back. They look at our field, so that's,
So trees would be better.
well, but she said it's a great improvement from what it was.
Right.
The thistles were so thick right up behind her building
Wade
when we took it, yeah, so.
Yeah, the thistles were a big problem.
And all
They
the
have
weeds,
done a wonderful job.
all the
It's,
weeds were affecting your garden, you told me too. That one time we were on the mower,
Yeah.
where I was out there,
Wayne,
Yes.
he lives down next to the
vet clinic.
vet clinic.
Oh,
So his borders, ours on like
the
two
south
sides actually, in the back
part of-
corner where the,
Part of the west.
where the
yeah.
older
So, but
trailers are, so.
Just off on this. side
Yeah,
here.
and I do have a row of trailers that are 10 foot off of your property,
Yep.
15 maybe.
Yeah.
And they
15
are
to
my
20
older
probably.
stuff, and he's the gentleman that I would think would complain. And those are basically out of the sight of anyone driving by. I mean, if you really look hard enough, you could see them, but, So he should be the one you're concerned with.
He is very organized. It looks very nice.
Thank you, Wayne.
All right, if there's no more direct questions, I'll close the public hearing at 7:20. We may still have questions on deliberating. So. All right, let's see here. Should we start with building inspection? Sue? Issues with the plan?
No issues, just one thing. Are you looking at gravel or crushed asphalt? Because gravel's not allowed.
We can do the
We can do the
Because it either
asphalt.
has to be asphalt, concrete, or for the plan commission, we could have crushed asphalt. It's just part of the area.
crushed asphalt is much more impervious to water than your gravel. So if you're concerned about,
It's the dust
if you're
issue.
concerned about it, but there's nobody there.
Right, it's
There's
just a
nobody
dust
out
issue.
there. I mean, I can do either one, but
When it was the field, did they have to go through that for the dust issue of plowing that up? You know, just curious.
We can
'Cause
do
that was
either one, but-
Very dusty when they were plowing there.
come and look at what my black regrind is in my at my semi shop, and it's, you know, there's traffic on it where there won't be over there, but it still gets dusty. So,
And we've got the black regrind.
and I could see it if we were in the middle of town. I could see the purpose of it, but we're bordered on all but one side, and it isn't even a full side with town of Ripon, not city. There's no, he's the nearest house,
And the speed of your trailers being moved is not,
especially across there. So it's really up to you guys. I don't know the cost difference for myself, but, and the ground right now is so firm on that high end that I really wouldn't even have to dig it out. I could just put 6 inches of gravel over the top, you know, but,
Or the asphalt,
or the asphalt.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't have a problem if that's required to stay within your current code. I don't feel it's necessary and the best answer, but none of my water goes to any of my neighbors except for the junkyard. And that doesn't even probably make it that far. So it's all downhill from the funeral home,
The junkyard's so much higher than what we are, that, than what our property is, the junkyard's really built up a lot. So there's no,
So the concern, you can write it into what you guys want.
yeah,
It's up to you.
Yeah, it either has to be a hard surface or crushed asphalt.
Okay.
crushed asphalt it is then. for
And then
now.
the other item is the landscaping. We do have a landscaping ordinance, so we have to have a point system with the perimeter of the area. It has to have so many points.
Meaning,
So you might have to put more than just this row of trees in with the
Okay.
calculations. You might have to put a few extra in to start with.
close, you mean?
No, it's a point system. You have to have so many points to go around a perimeter of a parking area. It's in our ordinance, so these just along here might not be enough.
So you could, what you're saying is each tree, for example,
Each
might
tree
be
is
worth
maybe
1
5
point,
points.
5 points? Okay, so you may have 5, 10, 15, 20, 20, 30, 50 points here. For the total perimeter of your parking area, you may need 55 or 60 or 70 points.
Larger
We're
trees,
kind of
it's
getting,
more
we're
points.
working at this thing backwards. Okay, I think obviously from the building inspector's perspective, they gave their thoughts. We need to look at the code that exists. And I think everybody in the plan commission received a memorandum, I believe. So you can't go backwards like this. They made their presentation, they're entitled to make a presentation. That's what a conditional use permit requires. They provided some information in writing. They supported it this evening. They've got a drawing of where they're going. But the problem is that we are dealing with very specific questions concerning Number one, it has to have a principal use. It has no principal use. Therefore, it cannot be approved under a conditional use. Now, you can stretch it and say, there's a principal use in the town of Ripon, adjacent there too, but that kind of flies in the face of the fact this is the city of Ripon. It's not the town of Ripon. Okay? So that's where you got to start your analysis. Then you go down the other items that were identified and we can deal with them specifically. But you got to start at the beginning before we get into points and gravel and obviously there was no discussion in the application of putting in blacktop or concrete or bituminous surface. They're offering that this evening. Certainly that may be part of the consideration moving forward, but you got to first start with a principal use for the property. There is none.
And parking is not considered a principal use in the industrial code, correct?
Correct. So parking alone can't gain a conditional use.
And storage of, oh, sorry, you were
No,
going to say something.
I just wanted the definition of the principal use.
Yeah, it's in the memo. We can read it.
I'd like, just if you could
Okay.
describe it, please.
Okay.
Industrial.
Let me get to it. As for business and commercial uses that principally serve industrial needs and activities. Han Logistics is not establishing a principal use on the property. There is no other adjacent principal use that this property is adjacent to, i.e. no buildings or structures, and does not have a principal use established within the city limits that this property would serve. The zoning ordinance is based off the establishment of a principal use for a property, allowing this accessory or serving principal use sets an inappropriate standard for industrial zoning within the city. It also ignores the city planning standard of establishing the highest and best use on a property. It is recommended that the property owner establish a allowable principal use of the property if you're going to grant a conditional use.
Is it fair to say that because Han Logistics' main office is not in the city of Ripon, that there can be no principal use for Han Logistics of the property?
That would be my reading of the code. Now, somebody can argue that you have one in an adjacent community, but that's not, we don't know what their code says. We don't control the town of Ripon.
Right.
This is the city of Ripon property. Came into the city annexation. It's a city issue. It's not a town issue. So the city has the right to say no principal use on the property.
Am I allowed to speak?
Not right now, not until the chair recognizes you.
Yeah, so the establishment of a principal use on the property could happen, could occur.
Right.
But the request is for not a principal use. And the business and commercial use of that principally serves an industrial use or need, typically you could look at that and say, like, if there's a company that had a property abutting it that was in a separate parcel, and they needed storage or some sort of accessory use on that, you could logically say, okay, those two uses together, you can allow it via conditional use. You could go as far as deed restricting those properties together, because logically then you don't want a continuation of a secondary use on that property into the future. So there are things that we would do within the code to establish that principal use, to then allow a secondary use and ensure that that would be tied to it, and there wouldn't be the inappropriate standard of establishing, say, a parking lot or a storage area or something that doesn't, like you said, establish that principal use.
Again, it's hard for someone to understand from the outside. It's hard for somebody to understand that lives out in the country. The city has set standards. That's what zoning is about, okay? And that runs contrary to a basic understanding. It's my property. I can do what I want with my property. That's the struggle here. The point is, the other property is in the town of Ripon. It's not in the city. This is a standalone parcel. It borders on a wetlands. The suggestion in here is that they're only going to pave up to 20,000. He stated in the public hearing that's about 30 trailers, maybe 40, maybe 50 if you squeeze them in there. He puts in his application, he has 74 trailers. Clearly, that doesn't add up to, even if you were to ignore the zoning code, which you shouldn't do, that you can put 74 trailers, which he currently has. And he stated they can come and go, they can come 20 and 20 can be gone and 30 can come back. He's being honest, completely honest here, okay? But what he's missing is that this is the city of Ripon municipal code that you're asking for a conditional use from. The outline that was given to you by the city administrator outlines the law as well as the reality of the situation. There'd be no question that you'd have to deal with, if you were to accept an argument that the principal use is across the street in the town, certainly he can annex that into the city. That becomes the principal use that works with this property, okay? That would be what the city administrator was indicating. Now you don't have to worry about deed restriction. It's in the city, it's right across the street. This would be a lot that you could use for these purposes. Without that, you can't get there. And even if you get there, you gotta get past the idea that we got stormwater management that has to be addressed for greater than 20,000, and 20,000 has been disturbed. The fact that nobody has chased him around, told him to get his trailers off the property is a fact, okay? And we all can accept that. We haven't operated under that premise that we're gonna go chasing people around. We now know, we now have to deal with it. He can't have his trailers parked there. So he's gotta make a decision, find us a principal use that goes with this if he wants to use that property, or get his trailers off the property. Again, that's a hardship, I understand, but that's the reality of the situation.
One second. My issue that I see is the principal use, I think, can be resolved one way or another. If that were resolved, my issue is the fact of the just coming barely under our restriction for waste or stormwater requirements on a property that isn't a floodplain. And with our code, even though we are under the 20,000 square feet, being in a floodplain property butting up to the creek, we do have the ability to put higher standards on that property because it is so close to our waterways. So that's one thing. And the second thing is our code clearly states that any vehicles must be parked on hard surface, whether it's asphalt, gravel, or not gravel, asphalt, blacktop, or the recycled asphalt. So parking it just on the grass is clearly against our code. But
Our main corporate office is 646 Hall Street, City of Ripon. Our licenses are 646 Hall Street, City of Ripon. You even brought up the 646 Hall Street. So, you also stated that I have more interest in the town of Ripon, so maybe my property belongs in the town of Ripon, where it belongs. It's a farm field. It has no business being where it is, so we can go whatever route you choose, but
There is a procedure to detach,
that is the,
but that's a legal process that you have to go through.
We know.
Okay.
we know.
All right.
Like I said, we're not asking for a whole lot.
No, but you are. You clearly are not following the code. So when you say you're not asking for a lot, you're running an end
So
run
the code
on property that you have more than 30 trailers parked on right now.
The code specifically, does that regard residential or does that regard all properties?
All properties.
How's it wrote?
All right,
Then-
we're talking about the zoning code.
Yeah.
And any parking,
Okay.
residential, commercial, industrial,
I can go all the way
requires
around, I
paving.
can go all the way around the city and find you examples of
And I can,
stuff on the grass.
list a dozen properties that we've required them to pave their parking spots.
Okay. Yeah, I need the property, I need to be able to use it, so we need to come to some,
When was the property owner notified of the issue?
So I think going back in the history of everything, ultimately, there was a situation there with the fire. We didn't see the use of the property really change, I think, until some of that activity was happening and there were things moved across the street. We weren't certainly during that time going to go and knock on the door, send a letter or something like that. It's a courtesy to not do that. It has exponentially grown over time to frankly be far more than what it started a few months back, to 74 trailers. There were conversations with the Hans and Excel Engineering regarding this property. They had originally come in and wanted to do a small footprint of 9,000 or so square feet, have just a parking area, come in with gravel. And the reality is the code at the time said 7,500 square feet would require stormwater management. Stormwater management in a floodplain would require a ton of work, a retention pond, things of that nature. So we had some meetings, we talked through it with them, and ultimately it seemed like there was a decision to stop at that time because there would be a requirement that stormwater management would be put in place. In that time, the code changed to the 20,000 square feet. There's been a resubmittal, so we always understood that there may be a resubmittal, and ultimately the plan commission with a conditional use permit application and reviewing the plans, if they were submitted to satisfy the code, there could be an opportunity where the trailers would not need to be moved, right? We have not been submitted a plan that is compliant with the code. There remain issues with the stormwater management, bumping up within 20 square feet of the requirement in a sensitive area, as well as the understanding that there are more trailers there exceeding that 20,000 square feet by a large number. Our engineers in reviewing this plan have said, you know, just because they aren't disrupting it, but they are using it, they would apply the higher standard and say they need to follow stormwater management. So it is recommended, because they are exceeding at times well further than 20,000 square feet, with the addition of that and the trailers, that stormwater management be put in. That would kick them back to having to put in a retention pond, all of those things. And I think that certainly is an engineering and a challenge and adds cost and whatnot to the project. Ultimately, that is where it stands today. We have communicated to them through this process that they are non-compliant with the current zoning code, that they have not received any permission from city staff or the zoning administrator to park the trailers there. There has been no communication along the way from them asking us as staff whether or not they are compliant and they can use the property for that. So we've led it to today, and ultimately, if there's not a conditional use permit issued, they are in violation of the city zoning code.
I have a question for Jason. The mayor and the city administrator brought up some of the more sensitive or some of the more complex challenges that come with dealing with any water runoff in a more sensitive area. From a purely technical standpoint, how much more of a challenge, maybe in terms of 1, 2, 3 times of what was submitted now, does it become when we talk about having to add in retention ponds and other, things for stormwater management?
I think the resubmittal happened once we found out, the stormwater ordinance was changed from, I think, 7,500.
we were forced to stay at the 7,500.
Right, to 20,000
so
square
we
feet.
went-
So that's why we submitted just under the 20,000 square feet. knowing that, it is in floodplain. There are wetlands a couple hundred feet away from where we're representing the gravel closer to the river, but that the grass in that field does act as a buffer and does act as a filter. Like Dave said, much of that stormwater won't even get to the river because of the grass and the root plants that are growing in that field that they maintain. So for me to represent that on my drawings, I did not have an issue. There were earlier correspondence with your consultant that they had no issue with fill because we're in the floodplain, not in the fill way. I think that changed somewhere along the line. And we resubmitted because the stormwater ordinance changed and they were allowed to, make a project of it that was worth doing without having to provide the stormwater BMP, essentially, if that makes sense.
Now, this river you guys speak of, is that the river that's down the road from us?
Silver Creek? That part of it?
Yeah, I believe it's just on the.
This is the
It
flood,
runs
this is
through
the
my
flood.
property.
I was gonna say,
This is the
that
floodplain.
flows
Yeah.
through most of Lamont's property back there.
Yeah, I mean, the floodplain
That
is rather apparent on the entire
If
property.
you go walk back there, you will be wet for most of it. Am I correct? Once you go to the back of your property?
In the spring, it's wet back in there. In springs when we have a fast melt and heavy rain, there will be standing water in some places. But I can walk any of my property on the north side of the creek, and it'll be dry, relatively dry. I don't have to wear boots.
And what's represented, that's a studied floodplain, so it's based on elevation, not based on the mapping that's represented on the computer, so it's based on elevation. And the majority of that gravel does not sit in the actual floodplain based on elevation. We're touching, I think we're tickling just the east side of it. We're ensuring that we're not filling within the floodplain, which would be a no-no according to your ordinance. So it's set up that any recycled asphalt that would be placed would be done at the surface. They would take the topsoil out and simply place and compact the recycled asphalt in place and not change its surface elevation within the floodplain itself. So we're not looking to fill. In my opinion, we've got plenty of filtering buffer to the waterway based on what's proposed on the drawing. Definitely more so than is an agricultural field. Just my professional opinion.
So, Lud,
Yes.
what are the steps that would need to be taken to make this a viable project? Primarily being only trailers can be parked on the asphalt, or
Correct. That would certainly
That-
be part
that's
of it.
number one.
Clearly, that's not an understanding we have this evening.
beyond that, what needs to take
Principal
place?
use.
What are
Principal
the
use
steps?
needs to be established.
Okay.
I suppose there could be 16, what's on 16 Hall Street or whatever? reference here?
646.
646, where
It's our home and our office,
Office, our main
business office.
Which is across the highway? Or
No,
just
it's
up
in the
there?
city
That's
of
in the
Ripon.
residential,
It's up the road.
to the west.
The property.
Oh, it's quite a ways, okay.
Yeah.
It's not adjacent there too, okay,
And it-
got it. All right, no, it needs to be adjacent there too.
Oh.
So either bringing in the property that's across the street into the city, that being a principal use, if there's anything going on there that constitutes a business transaction area,
Your
a
office.
building. If not, putting some kind of building on this property that suggests it's being used as a trailer leasing facility, which is what's going on here. So some business building is constructed on this property, and then this other land is being used for that purpose. Clearly, the wetlands issue, I'm not going to even begin to suggest I know that's engineering, and there's a debate on how much can be filled, how much can be touched, how much can be put into impervious surface. That would need to be addressed. If they backed off on how many trailers were to be on this property, and you got at that question early, maybe 30, and had a principal use for the structure, and did some landscaping, and made it so that any runoff is not going into the wetlands, that's what needs to happen.
Maybe this is more hypothetical than what you would want to answer, and if so, tell me. But
This is all kind of hypothetical.
yeah, absolutely.
Frankly.
To serve, I guess, to more clarify principal use,
Yep.
would a business storage, would some sort of storage for the business or some sort of small work area or a building, you've got to say that a building,
Yeah.
you know,
A leasing building,
that
they're
has-
leasing trailers.
that has
Somebody goes
some
to this
function.
location
Mhm.
and leases a trailer, and a transaction takes place, and there's your trailer.
And there's the trailer.
That-
That's the principal
That would
use.
be the principal use.
Or annexing the property across the street into the city.
Yeah, because it's
That
already got,
becomes
it's
principal
already got
to a
buildings and it's
second.
got
And it- yeah.
other improvements that, and he already indicated he does some repairs and some other work
By adjacent.
associated across that area, but that is not in the city of Ripon, as I understand it. So yes, that would be step one for the city to respond to this application or conditional use. Then we get into these other questions in terms of how are we setting it up, how much of it's being used, where are the trailers going to be parked? All those things are part of an application for conditional use under the city of Ripon zoning code. Again, I understand this feels heavy for somebody out in the township, and he's already indicated maybe the town lets him do this, and he's going to detach his property from the city. That's a choice. That's a choice.
Has that been a city of Ripon property for a long time?
No, not for too long.
I believe it
Brought in
was
by
3
Mullins,
years
wasn't
ago.
it?
Yeah, we,
Yeah.
3 years ago it was brought in.
I don't know if it was 3 years ago, it was rezoned. So the challenges on this property have been rather apparent in the city's eyes for at least the last 3 years. It was changed to industrial. There was a offer to purchase on the property, to put mini storage areas, you may recall. What they soon learned was it was in a floodplain. And anything they did would have to cause stormwater management as well as floodplain mitigation. So they walked away from the deal. Shortly thereafter, I believe the property was purchased by the Hans. But there's been a recent history of challenges with this property, particularly revolving around the floodplain.
what was it zoned before?
I think it was B2.
B2, okay.
Same as the funeral home.
So if I'm understanding correctly, recommendation would be to deny the conditional use tonight
Yep.
until other stipulations could be met.
Right, they certainly could bring it back, and that was a discussion we had early on with staff and the city administrator, was there was the dialogue, but they wanted it on this evening. Here it is. Unfortunately, it's contrary to the code.
Just a quick question, if it's denied tonight, is there a time span that needs to pass before they could resubmit a new application?
I
Versus-
believe
Versus if it
if
was
some,
just tabled?
some of the topics that we've discussed tonight are met, it could be as soon as the first meeting past those.
Okay, so there's
Those
nothing in
points.
city ordinance that would require you gotta wait 6 months until you can?
No, I mean, I wouldn't want to see a resubmittal with the exact same information, because it's going to get denied again. I assume it's going to get denied, but we'll have a vote to have that.
Want to make sure some municipalities, there's a difference between when you get denied versus tabled as far as when you can come back.
No,
So,
I-
just wanted to-
I've run into some of those
Yeah,
municipalities.
just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, as long as the issues are resolved, then there's no timeline. Anyone would like to have any?
Well, the industrial zoning is the only zone ordinance, or the only,
Possible, yeah.
that can have parking, trailer parking.
Yeah,
Okay,
right.
so there's nothing that they
There's
can
nothing else they
rezone
can
it to?
rezone.
Okay, that's good.
Any other questions? Anyone would like to make a motion?
Well, as hard as this is to do, I'll make a motion to deny the conditional use permit for Han Logistics.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion, specifically calling out the non-meeting of 20.36.060 and also needing a principal use under city code.
Any further discussion?
I'd just like to comment that this is a hard thing. I know that these people, I know their property, they keep it top notch. They've done a lot for the city. But in the end, we do have to follow the city ordinance and make that hard decision to go this route. And hopefully they can come back and with a plan and we can get it resolved for them.
I would like to
I
second
agree.
that sentiment. I would like to work with you on this, but there are certain milestones that have to be hit.
What's in? Yeah, you guys are gonna fight over a $300 tax parcel. It isn't worth it to you. You'll spend more on attorneys. It's nice working with you, but there's no bending. You need to change some. You need to start respecting small business people that contribute a lot. Whether we're actually in the city or we're within 30 feet of the city. That's wrong. You should all be looking at it a little closer to see how you could draw a business and help businesses prosper. So whether you gotta change some zoning, whether you gotta look at things,
I don't know what Dave's thinking.
we're gonna carry on. So,
We'll detach.
no, we're not making any threats. We're just saying that it's a hard pill to swallow for all we do, all we do spend, our employees that work here. And I can drive by your big businesses and they got all out of town people. So we'll leave it at that.
So,
Thank
all
you.
those in favor of the motion to deny, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion is approved for denial. Any project updates or staff reports?
No.
Okay. Any future agenda items?
I don't know if we'll have a meeting next month or not, but I don't think we have anything right now.
Okay.
Is there anything in that ordinance that we should look into? No? Okay.
No, Ed,
No, because
you can't
if
just-
their main building was in the city,
City, yeah.
it wouldn't have been an issue.
Yeah.
It would have passed.
Well,
they had
that part would
they
not
had
have
a deal,
been
but
an
they're
Yeah.
Right,
30 trailers versus.
Oh, yeah. They would have their principal
They would have
use.
to come
they
in.
would have had their principal use.
And then they just have technical challenge of
Yeah, they have
We
floodplain.
changed the ordinance to be way more business friendly,
Right.
so
Yeah.
we'll continue.
that
to-
20
we'll continue-
20,000,
yeah,
yeah,
20,000 square
Continue
feet.
to look at things, so for future agenda, as we talked about looking at, the zoning code for commercial use, updating it as well as industrial use. So we're gonna continue to look at doing that, but that's something completely separate from this entire
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, when Adam talked about how do you control this in the future, is what you need to look at. Zoning isn't about just today, it's about the future. So you allow this property to just be there with some trailers on it, bordering on a wetlands, I appreciate a junkyard out in the wetlands if you drive out there.
In the township outside of our jurisdiction.
Yeah,
we don't- right, yeah, we
It's
don't.
just gonna be part of that, because that's what it is. The idea that they can move on, they decide not to, or they retire or whatever, that's what it is. That's what you made it, and you agreed that it could be used for that. That's not the highest and best use for that property. It can be developed for other uses. And you just gotta do it according to the rules and regulations of the Department of Natural Resources.
And a future owner that is going to develop it for better use would probably have the financial ability to put in all the stormwater management.
Exactly.
All right.
Yes, and this.
Anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
The question was raised regarding that portion.
Yeah, I did.
All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? They're adjourned at 7:55.